How's that? Is that okay?
Yeah.
It's kind of my apothecary. It's a bit messy. Cool. All right. Good. That will do.
Well, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to jump on here with me and have a little chat. And yeah, this is my channel, Walking the White Road, and we explore Mayan and Mesoamerican cosmology. So yeah, I suppose we should take a moment to introduce you to those watching. Mark's journey with the sacred calendar of the Maya began in 1998 when he was introduced to it in his hometown of Ipswich. Am I saying this right? Ipswich, Suffolk, UK. Within months, the calendar became somewhat of an obsession, leading him to quit his job, sell his house, and buy a ticket to Mexico the following year. In this preliminary trip, he discovered more than he expected, yet had to return to the UK for 8 years. However, in 2008, he made the decision to move to Guatemala for the foreseeable future to understand the calendar in a deeper way. This journey led him to his teacher, and he was eventually initiated as a Naki, or Maya spiritual guide, in February of 2015. Great. I first met you back in November 2020 when I took your workshop on the Choki, the Mayan Sacred Calendar, in English. And yeah, that workshop was the beginning of my journey in this study and opened doors to a whole new reality for me, and a whole new world, and a new way of perceiving time and the nature of reality itself. And you were the first to read my Mayan Cross. And as I've shared with many others, that cross reading connected so many dots for me, and it helped me make sense of myself and my life, in general. So, yeah, I just wanted to thank you for that. And like I shared with you, since then, and almost 2 years ago, I decided to expand the study and work and write my own interpretations of the ritual count on my Substack every day. And I wanted to create a library, like a database. And that's kind of how my study has evolved since then. And so now you're the fourth person, or Aki, who I have as a guest on in this podcast. And I wanted to mention that, being that your site is called the Four Pillars, I just thought it was kind of perfect that you're the fourth guest, and that we chose Kahib Ke, for deer, for those who don't know, to have you on. So, the first thing I wanted to ask you is, like, can you share with us a bit of why you chose the name The Four Pillars?
Yeah, it was purely intuitive, and it was actually about something completely different. It was really like to do with the 4 pillars of nutrition, because I thought I was going to be going into nutrition in a more deeper way. And so then it was one of those things where I realized, in particular, according to the creation story of the Maya, the sky was raised from the sea by the 4 first men on 4 pillars. And so it's about the creation of our world. And subsequently, it's kind of interesting that a dear friend of mine who works in particular with Chinese astrology and this kind of thing, and he was looking at it from the point of view of feng shui. And the 4 pillars is something which is used in that. And I didn't realize quite what a universal term it might be, and how diverse it would apply, kind of like how many things would be coming in. So that was where it came from, originally, because originally when I started writing my site, the calendar, as you read in my bio, has been my passion since 1998. It's been something that drew me in, and I can't even begin to kind of like describe how strange it was, because, like, honestly, I grew up in a very, very non-diverse part of the UK, and I wasn't acclimatized to foreign travel, and we didn't have Discovery Channel back in those days and that kind of thing. And so, when I went along to that first meeting around about the calendar, I honestly had very, very little idea about, where Guatemala was or who the Maya were and that kind of thing. It's not like I dreamt of pyramids in Central America from an early age. Well, pyramids, but Egyptian ones. So, I didn't realize quite how much it was going to become my life. And when I started the site, I also didn't realize quite how much the site would be, kind of like then very much focusing on just the Mayan stuff. I had a bunch of other things that I thought that I was going to include. But they ended up not making the cut because I simply didn't have time through, what I was dedicating into writing about the calendar each day.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. Well, the feng shui part I find really interesting too, because I think in many ancestral cultures, ancient cultures, the elements in the four directions. I know feng shui is about energy too, the flow of energy. So I think that's probably why there's a correlation there.
Yes, there was also something very interesting that when I was initiated, part of the initiation process or part of the ritual is to receive your Barra Sagrada. And your Barra Sagrado in Votorio is, it's your bundle, your sacred bundle. And the heart of this bundle is the Tite seeds. The Tite seeds are what, helps you to link to the unseen world, which helps you to link to the patrilineage altars. But also there are something that you use as a forecasting device or divinatory device. And they're extremely accurate. It's unbelievable how good these seeds are. And, sometimes I have to admit when people come and ask me for a Tite divination or something like that, I'll be looking at the answer going, well, the seeds are saying this and I'm looking at it and it doesn't really make any sense to me. And the people are turning around going, how did you know that? And I'm like, well, the seeds told me, that's it, and it's kind of like, I'm just speaking as the seeds speak, as it were, of what they tell me without influencing it, without trying to understand it, because it's not my message, it's sort of like, a message for somebody else. Anyway, the reason why I mentioned the Tite is because one of the other formats that I was trained with was the I Ching, and in particular, rather than the coin version, to use the bamboo sticks within the I Ching. And what you do is you draw a series of 4 sticks that you fill each kind of gap between your fingers with. And the reason why that's interesting is because when you ask the question of Tite seeds, you then draw sequences of 4 seeds. And so I was looking at it going, these 2 divination methods, both of which I would say, if you've got a question that you really can't get answered, either the Tite seeds or the I Ching, they're both phenomenal guides for getting you the right answer. And both of these disciplines, let's say, and the action of the sacred calendar itself, for me, I very much see it as the ability or bringing the ability or the tool which allows us to see through reality to the programming behind it. It's like if we imagine that, kind of like this, what we're perceiving is like the screen. It's not the coding that is making the image appear on the screen. And if the coding is out of whack, then the image will go, kind of like will not be correct either. And so in order, when our reality is not working the way that we expect it to, or if something's going wrong, whether that might be an illness or whether, might be kind of like all sorts of different things. It's like, right, okay, well, we've got to go behind the scenes and have a look at the way that the code is running in order to understand what we need to tweak in order to bring it back into balance. And we could see that through the calendar. Yeah. Thank you. And, kind of like then we could see it through the calendar. We could also see it, kind of like that tweak that we might make through the sacred fire. So it's kind of like understand the like the Tite, the Ching or whatever, they are like the diagnostic kit. And then the fire is the remedy.
Mm-hmm. I definitely want to talk about the fire. And also the ceremonial aspect of it, just I find so fascinating. Before we get started there, I want to kind of dive into your first, your initial journey into Mayan traditions through the classes that you took. So were your first teachers in England?
Yes.
Okay. Can you share a little bit
For sure. I'll give you the full version, as it were. So basically, as I was growing up, I started realizing that there were some things, let's say, that were different. Things like I could draw out headaches from people with my hands and things like that. And by the time I was 21, I got told, hey, you really need to learn what you're doing, because, doing it the way you're doing it is not going to be good for you. And like any 21-year-old in the early 90s, let's say, trying to, kind of like this stuff, there was no internet. There was no kind of like networks the way that we have them. There was no Facebook. None of this stuff existed. And so really you had to find out by knowing the right people, knowing where to look. And where I grew up there, it wasn't exactly like, let's say, Glastonbury or Sedona or somewhere like that. And so, kind of like the opportunities were few and far between. And quite honestly, at the age of 21, there was other things which were engaging me far more strongly. Now, by the time I got through to my mid-20s, I ended up in, toxic relationship, in a job that I didn't enjoy, and all of the kind of things that we, like, let's say, fall into when we're not actually maybe taking control of our life or actually choosing to be the captain of our life. And this culminated on December 6th of 1996, when I was car number 6, funnily enough, of a 13-car pileup. And I walked away. And at that point in time, it was like, I have to say, as I was sliding, it was one of these dark, greasy, foggy days in the UK in early December. It's not a nice time of year to be outside. And as I was sliding towards the cars that were in front of me on the road, I felt a great sense of calm come down. In fact, I felt the calmest that I've probably ever felt in my life, which is the last thing that you'd expect when you got like a bunch of cars in front of you and you're not being able to stop. And all I can say is it felt like somebody had come down and guided me into a safe space and said, well, sorry, sunshine, it's not your time. You got stuff to do. Off you go. It's time to get out and go and do something else. But learn to take your life seriously. And after that, well, the relationship that was the first thing to go. That changed rather quickly. And then I read a book called The Celestine Prophecy. And that put me onto a very different path. And I was so enamored by it. First, the book that spoke to me in a way that a book had never spoken. I'd never read that kind of book before. And I started doing the experiential guide. And there came to a point where, as I say, I came from a very non-diverse part of the UK, as far as I could see. And said, I need some help. And the next day, I just happened to find in a newspaper that I happened to find an advert that said, find your healing power. I thought, well, I have to call this number. So I called this number. Ended up that I was talking to somebody that I used to go to school with. So it was kind of like synchronicity. After asking for help, I find this synchronicity.
Which is what the Celestine Prophecy is about too.
Yes, exactly. It was literally practicing, this experiential guide that I was going through was living itself out in real life. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I have to go along with this. It introduced me to Reiki. And then there was a whole bunch of other things which were interesting, but didn't pop in the way that Reiki popped. And that was my first introduction to any kind of spiritual practice. Now, this is kind of apt because I look at when we're recording this and I realize, okay, it's just about the same time of year because it was early January of 1998. There was a presentation on the Maya and Maya calendars. Now, I'd started going along to these classes every couple of weeks, or these presentations every couple of weeks. I'm just like, I'm forming a nice network of friends here. I'll go, I've got no idea what this one is about, but I'll go along. And it was this similar obsession that came out. It was just something that grabbed me. I was like, I have to find out more about this. Now, part of that was the 2012 thing, because they said, hey, this calendar's going to end in 2012. And I was like, well, I'll probably still be alive then. I ought to find out what that's about. There was that. And so I asked these people, kind of like about what they had, and they had, an officially sanctioned Maya Mysteries School, which was part of a worldwide group with an elder named as Hunbat's Men as the, kind of like the president of that group, as it were.
Wow, his name is Hun.
And it turned Hunbat's Men. He was a rather famous Maya daykeeper from Merida.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So they were, officially sanctioned, as it were, kind of like these were the, people who had actually been here and done the work. And they'd also worked with Don Alejandro Cirilo Perez from up in San Francisco El Alto. Now, the really interesting thing was that even in this area of the country, this Maya Mystery School was about 6 miles down the road from where I lived. And I thought, what are the chances? I mean, it's like difficult to find a Maya Mystery School anywhere in the world, but 6 miles from your doorstep, I mean, you can't ignore that. And so I started going along to their monthly or bi-weekly gathering. I don't remember. I think it was monthly, if I remember rightly. And from that, I was then invited to go and help them with a weekend retreat workshop thing that they were running in Glastonbury in May of 1998. Now, I went along very much as, hey, I'm the new boy. I just got here. I know nothing and all of that kind of thing, which I actually enjoy fulfilling that position. And I kind of got plunged into the deep end of it with regards to ceremony and all of that kind of thing. And there was one point where I said to my teacher, kind of like, I don't know about this. And he convinced me that I'd done this before and it was time to kind of like step up to it. And I think that this was, my first introduction to ceremony was with them in February of 1998, but that's the ceremonies that we made in Glastonbury with Mexican elders were something which, that was the threshold. That was stepping over a point from which there was no return. And it set me into, a program, particularly with, an elder named Alberto Ruz. He's the son of the archaeologist that discovered the tomb of Pakal at the Temple of Inscriptions in Palenque. A very magical man. And he was kind of like certainly another one of my mentors with regards to my journey. And the ceremony that he conducted, I think that was, kind of like what really put me on my path. That was where, as I said, a year after that, in May of 99, that's when I quit my job. That's when my house sold. And that's when I jumped on a plane to Mexico to come and find out more.
Mm-hmm. And so you went into the study not through the academic, astronomical learning about the Nawaz. You went straight into the ceremonial world of the Mayan tradition.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was as much, my background originally, I was a research chemist. I like maths. I like science. I love astronomy. I mean, it's kind of like, it's looking at the stars has been something that I've been doing since I was a kid and that kind of thing. But when this calendar system got hold of me, and when the ceremony and the feeling of ceremony and what ceremony means to me was just that was really what grabbed me. But it's like, I was going to say rather like a Russian doll, it's kind of like, it's layers within layers within layers. but it's almost like a fractal version of that expands out in every direction as well. And it's like, right, okay, pick a part of it that you're going to go with. Because for me, the fire ceremony is the heart. For me, the fire ceremony is deeply ingrained into my heart and something that I love doing. It's like I could never get enough. And if I happen to not be at home in Guatemala, where I am now, then what are the things that I miss? It's a fire ceremony and my dogs. It's kind of like it's being here to make ceremony on a regular basis is such a strong connection. And if the fire ceremony is the heart, then I think the mathematics of the calendar are like the mind of it. And this is kind of like, this is the heart and the mind go together. We understand how to use the calendar to know when to make ceremony. And the ceremony, like I said, we've got the diagnostic tool and we've got the remedy, and the two work together.
It's beautiful. I love that. Okay. So now it's, in your story, it's 1990, and now you've dropped everything, your work, your relationship. What was the pivotal decision to make you move to Central America?
In 1999, it was literally, I have to know more about this. Now, I decided, I think I'd come to the conclusion that I wanted to travel. But again, it's kind of like, it was as soon as I really made my decision to go to Mexico first, that's when my house sold. It was kind of interesting. I was deliberating as to where to go, and I was thinking about India and that kind of thing. And for something like 5 months, I didn't get a single phone call about my house. The day after I said I'm going to Mexico, I got a phone call and my house sold. So it was kind of like, again, follow the synchronicities, where you're being led. And, I do feel that there is some kind of like, maybe my spirit guides really need to knock hard on the door to make me listen or something like that. But it's certainly been something that's pushed me this way. And my prime instinct, I was reading all sorts of books about the Maya, about 2012, about the calendar and all this kind of thing before I went to Mexico. And it was quite interesting that I turned up and I met some people and I started moving around Mexico with them. And they weren't there for the Maya at all. They weren't there for the history or the culture. They were there because it was a fun, cool place to travel and all that kind of thing. And then we would go to sacred sites and they'd be like, what's going on here, Mark? What's going on over there? And, it's sort of like say, oh, this is the book, or this is, look at this pyramid. It's got 91 steps on each side. So it's 364 and all of this kind of thing. And I continued. I went down to Belize and then through to Guatemala. I came here to Lake Atitlan in August of September of 1999. I was actually even in San Marcos, La Laguna at that time. And, I guess, certainly at that time, I had no idea that would be where I would end up. But then, in September of 99, I went to Palenque. And I would say that in October of 99, that's where a key initiation happened, which was nothing to do with, kind of like meeting. Well, it was certainly to do with meeting some people, but it was almost as if like, forming a bond with that site itself, and Palenque being incredibly important to me. It still is, I sometimes question why I don't live close to Palenque. But
where is Palenque exactly?
Palenque is in southern Mexico. It's just kind of like about 3 hours from San Cristobal de las Casas.
Okay, I moved to Mexico recently. My upline also got pulled, like just a nudge, an impulse to move to Mexico, and we're here now in Valle de Bravo.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are certain sites that it's when people say to me, "Hey, I'm going to Mexico. Which sites should I go to?" Or "I'm coming to Central America. Which sites should I go to?" And for accessibility, unfortunately, they're spread across 3 countries. It would be Palenque, Tikal, and Copan, as being kind of like 3 of the most important ones to go to. And I would certainly put others in there. Yashha is one of my favorites, right? Kind of like in the eastern border of Guatemala with Belize. The Yashha and Topochte at Satellite are absolutely amazing sites. And then if you've got the time and or money to do it, El Mirador, which is one of the most fantastically energetic sites, and Nakbay from there. But kind of like it's a 3-day walk to get to Nakbay, so you've got to allow 6 days in total, and it's not that easy.
Wow. And so, yeah, when you mentioned Palenque, I remember reading on your site that that's when the big breakthrough came. That's what you say, like when the calendar landed in your heart. So I want to hear about that.
Yeah. Again, I was introduced by a friend. Again, this was somebody who, a friend in England told me that I needed to go to Palenque. Now, kind of like I'd already been in, kind of like in Central America for 4 or 5 months before this happened. So I finally eventually found my way there in, kind of like in the way that I do. And I met somebody there who, her first words to me said, "Oh, you're back." Whereas, well, I've never been here before. She said, "Are you sure? I swear you've been, we were talking just a few weeks back and, all of this kind of thing." And, she was the one that introduced me to the Mayan Cross. And the Mayan Cross is something which I subsequently think is what brings the calendar to life. The way that I describe it is that if we know our Nawal, this can sometimes be like seeing a black and white picture. It gives us an understanding, it gives us some detail, but it's, kind of like it's a certain level of detail. Now we go from the black and white picture by adding the number. And so today is Kech. We know some things about Kech. Then we know today is 4 Kech. Okay, now we've turned that picture from black and white into color. And it's become something which we've now got a higher level of resolution, a higher level of detail with. Okay. But if that ordeer is not against a background that gives us an idea of scale, if that 4 deer is not around something which gives us an understanding of how it moves, we don't really know so much about the deer. And what happens is if we then translate it into the Mayan cross, which would show us where it comes from and where it goes to, then it gives us an idea of how that Nawal evolves, what it brings, how it moves. And now we're starting to get into kind of like from a very 2-dimensional flat image into something which is 3-dimensional, possibly 4-dimensional, moving in time as well. And so it opens up a much greater level of detail. And then when you start working with the Mayan cross, it gives us a huge amount more information to work with regards to our own personal movement within our Nawal and our abilities, our challenges, everything that's connected with it. And so that step into the Mayan cross was like, it's like imagining taking your world from being a still image into a movie. That's what I received there physically. But I would say that the energies that I connected with at Palenque were also something where it reminded me, I think is the best way of putting it. And that reminder was what I needed. It was kind of like certainly nowhere near the last part of the puzzle to fit into place, but a key part of the puzzle for that level, because you know how it is. It's like, as we go through life, we might finish that puzzle, but that's only a stairway to the next puzzle, which is a stairway to the next puzzle. It'd be pretty boring if we'd finished all the puzzles, but it was kind of like something clicked into place in Palenque that helped me to, let's say, I think, complete one level and move to the next.
Okay. And you said Palenque is in south of Mexico, and your friend that was there that introduced the Mayan cross to you in the calendar, this is the Quiche version, right? Because the Quiche and the Mexican Yucatec versions are different.
Yes. Well, this was certainly something which was, well, the Nahuales are the same, the names are different.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's kind of like, yes, what I was reading at that point in time was written in Yucatec dialect, but with Quiche translation as well. And of course it was with the, you know, what could be seen as the Quichean timing, as it were. So everything was, you know, kind of like, correct in that way. And so, yes, that was what I was united with, or reunited with. I don't know. And I had to put that in this place. And, you know, I kind of like, I do see, you know, there's different ways that we could see different sites. Some people would say that Copan is like Mayan Paris, because Copan Ruinas in Honduras, it's so beautiful. The art that they created there is just incredible. And then we have sites which are much more dedicated to astronomy. And then we have sites which are dedicated to mathematics and philosophy. And so, like, it depends on, you know, which school you go to, rather like different schools within a university or whatever. Some are going to specialize in one thing and some are going to specialize in other things. But one of the things that most of them specialized or had some dedication to, was astronomy. And the archaeoastronomy of the Maya sites is just absolutely phenomenal. You know, it's kind of when we realize just how dedicated these people were to their watching of the skies, and we realize how incredible their mathematics was with what they worked out with regards to cycles within time and cycles in the sky. We see it at Palenque. You know, when we look at the temple, which is often known as the palace, which has something which very much looks like an observatory, which has a roof on it now, which probably wasn't there in the first place. We see ball courts, which are aligned to certain features. We see, in other places, these groups called E-groups, where you have a temple in the middle, and then you have a long mound with 3 little temples on it, marking the summer solstice sunrise, the winter solstice sunrise, and the equinox sunrise. And, you know, this is what it's all about. In fact, one of the oldest structures, a huge platform at a place called Agua de Fenix, which was revealed by this LiDAR scan in 2017, is very much aligned with these sunrises and the timing of the solar year. And so, you know, kind of like it's almost seeing that their civilization was founded on astronomy. It was founded on the study of the skies. And then the mathematics, which came in later, helped to facilitate it. So when we see codices like the Dresden Codex, for example, which shows you eclipses going far into the future and far into the past, or shows you when Venus is going to rise as the morning star or the evening star, and it's all coded using sacred calendar. And so they're working these systems to understand what joins the stars to the earth, to the human.
It's kind of mind blowing because the more you think about it, you're like, they weren't, I mean, I asked this to all of my guests. I'm like, do you believe they were not from this civilization, but came from a previous civilization?
Yeah. I think that's probably the good way of looking at it, whether, you know, kind of like the Maya of today are descended from the Maya of then, and the Maya of then are descended from the, you know, kind of like the wisdom carriers from maybe a civilization that got wiped out somehow. You know, we got the Graham Hancock's theories. We've got the various ideas, which I think, well, they certainly sound a lot more plausible to me than, other theories that are out there. And I think also a lot more respectful to understand that this understanding, this knowledge, this genius has been their lineage for thousands of years. That they didn't pick it up from somebody else, and that, kind of like these people. I mean, if we said that the Maya of the 6th century were probably ahead of the Europeans of the 16th century, probably even further than that, with their understanding of mathematics and astronomy and all sorts of things. The roads that they were building through the jungle, the Saka Bay, were not just like the Roman roads of the similar era, but like, kind of like they were also 9 meters high, 35 meters across, coated in lime so they could move at night between these mega structure cities. It's one of the things I love about this place is that our understanding is still unfolding and evolving. In 2016, they would have said that at its height, the Maya civilization was probably about 1.7 million. After they flew that little plane with the LiDAR scanner over Petén, they had to increase their guess by a multiple of 10 to 17 million. It was a huge population, a huge civilization. And of course, this allowed great advances. We see in some of the reservoirs at Tikal, you find zeolite. And zeolite is a material that we use in modern water filters. They were using zeolite when the Roman civilization, supposedly the pinnacle of their time, were using cloth bags to filter water. This civilization is incredible. I think that whilst I understand, now there's a great deal of interest in it, that kind of thing, I think that the Maya should certainly be up there with the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, the ancient Indians, the ancient Chinese, with regards to what they were doing on mathematics, astronomy, agronomy, architecture, archaeoastronomy, the whole lot. They are just incredible people.
I would love to dive into how the Mayan Cross readings started for you. Like, how did you go into that process? I'm assuming it was like probably a little bit later than all of that, right?
Not a lot later, actually. That was the funny thing. Once I got hold of that Mayan Cross understanding in 1999, I started working with it in a big way through to January of 2000. And that really, I realized just how important it was and how rich the information is when you start to work with it. Now, I was also doing, that period during the mid 90s through to the turn of the millennium in the Gregorian calendar anyway, was really a time of great growth for me. And there was other things that I was experimenting with. And one of the things, I know it's slightly off topic as it were, was a meditation, which is known as the Flower of Life meditation. And when I started working with that, certain things came to mind, certain understandings came in. And I think that part of that helped me to understand the cross in a better way. Now, that's not trying to mix those two things up. But really, one of the things that came out of that was the understanding of the extrapolation of the Mayan cross. Because I'd already seen how important it was and how, we could see that we could look at, okay, here's our childhood. We're going to go through the adulthood and into our eldership. These different parts of our lives are going to bring out different parts of our energy. They're going to enhance some things and they're going to hold some other things back. And if we understand where we're supposed to be focusing at any point in time, then we're certainly able to get the best out of what we're here to do. And that's really it, I see the calendar as a navigation aid. That navigation is time. That navigation is our life. And in some ways, It's like reading the instruction manual for the, for the game of life, as it were. And if we've been trying to play without the instruction manual and we keep wondering why we end up back at the beginning again, well, kind of like there's a reason for that. It gives us a better understanding of how to play this game and how to play this game in a way that makes it enjoyable. I excuse my irreverent way of looking at the world or whatever, but sometimes it's like imagining that if we're all characters in a video game or something like that, if we've never read the instruction manuals and we're basically just button mashing and hoping for the best, we're going to find the game frustrating. We're never going to get to the next level. We're kind of like, we could get defeated by the same enemy all the time or whatever. And really what we got to do is understand what are our special moves? What buttons do we have to press in what order in order to bring the best out of what we can do? And how can we then use that to overcome what lies ahead of us in an enjoyable way? It's like, it's not supposed to be, kind of like it's supposed to be fun, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And did you receive your first cross reading from that friend in Palenque?
No, actually, I never received a cross reading from anybody at that point in time. Everything that I was doing was self-study. It was just throwing myself into the work because that was what was available. As I said, the internet had been invented by that point in time, but it was like an empty library. There was nothing on it. And, kind of like particularly moving around Guatemala in like the late 90s. I mean, the Civil War had only stopped a couple of years before that. And so kind of like mobile phones weren't a thing here, that's for sure. And smartphones had like not been invented, would be invented about 8 years later. And so we didn't have the connectivity that we have now to go and find people, to go and speak to people. Even when I came back to Guatemala in 2008, Facebook had been invented, but there, again, you're not going to find that, well, at the time you wouldn't find that many elders on Facebook. You had to go and kind of like use your shoes and find a phone number and try and get through to them in that way. Yeah. And, and sometimes again, it was just good fortune that put you in the right place at the right time.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Everything wasn't as accessible as it is now. You were in the very beginning of this whole system emerging.
That's it. And even, kind of like there are some fairly well-known books that I know were written not by somebody coming and doing research, but them basically making telephone interviews from the US without actually kind of like setting foot down here. And I don't mean to negate their content in any way. I mean, you talk to the right people. It doesn't matter whether you're here present or whether you're some way away and that kind of thing. But that's, kind of like the way that it was before. I remember certain roads being built here in Guatemala. There's like, oh my goodness, that's just taken 3 hours off our journey kind of thing because that road exists now where it didn't before. And, trying to overcome those things and understanding, I'm not painting myself as kind of like a hero or anything like that. It's more a case of like, it just used to be really hard work. And now everything's so accessible. You can pretty much message an elder through Facebook or WhatsApp and get your answers, which is wonderful. I mean, this is the evolution of our culture, the evolution of our systems and that kind of thing, which is amazing. And it's given the elders a voice that I don't think they used to have.
I heard, Kenneth Johnson, of course. I heard in an interview he did with somebody that the cross is it's more of a contemporary thing, that it wasn't, I guess, part of what was rescued from, the codices and all that stuff. Like, this is something that recently came through, I think in the 70s. What do you think about that?
I know that my teacher also says that he feels that it is a modern adaptation. And, kind of like to really see that they think that it came out of from a professor in San Francisco El Alto in like the 70s or 80s or something like that. And I've also taken that to an anthropologist in Guatemala City who states that the cross is very, very ancient. And so, kind of like I know some elders that work with it. I know some elders that choose not to. It's used in a huge amount of work by, kind of like the elders here. And so I have to say, I can't be certain of its origins. I can't be certain that it was old or that it was new. We can see certain patterns within the Dresden Codex in particular that seem to follow they show glyphs which follow particular days in the way that they would be followed through the Mayan cross.
Okay.
Now, I don't know whether that is evidence of the cross being there, then. It might be, it might not be, because it doesn't literally show that. But what I've seen, coming from many different ethno-linguistic groups is that this cross is part of, kind of like an important part of the calendar. And so, sometimes as I say, I am stuck between that kind of like hearing a couple of different things about it. And going back to kind of looking at it, say, right, okay, well, what function does it perform and how well does it perform that function? Does it give me the information that helps people, or is it no use whatsoever? And I would say that looking at it from the point of view, or looking at it from that point of view, I've seen it to be a great help to people. Now, sometimes those things can be developed later on. Even the calendars, these are not, well, I was going to say these are not thousands of years old. As far as they could see, that the sacred calendar was, kind of like the earliest reference was a inscription. I think it was 7 deer found in a tomb at Holmul or San Bartolo in Guatemala, which was dated to about the 4th or 5th century BC. So, kind of like it's old. But, and again, this is the thing with archaeology here, from what I see, is that it almost seems like every year they have to adjust the timescales. They have to roll it back to say, okay, we just found this. This is not supposed to be here. And the only way we can make this right is to roll back the timeline a bit further. And this is also what I love about it, is that it is an ongoing revelation. It is an ongoing exploration that is not constrained in the same way that other archaeological ideas are, because it seems to me that the archaeologists that are working in the Maya field in particular are very open to saying, okay, all right, well, we're going to have to put it back another 50 years because that's, what we can date it to. And so the evidence being, scattered amongst the trees, kind of there, it's like, what was it last year where they found this totally new site, a huge site, sort of like almost a rival to Calakmul that they only happened to find because the LiDAR revealed it while they were doing the scan for the Tren Maya or something like that. And all of a sudden you've got a big new site that nobody even knew existed, kind of thing. This is, kind of like putting things back together. And I think that fractionating of society came not through, went through a so-called collapse, or maybe be better to call it a revision of society in the 10th century, where the cities of Peten, for example, were abandoned, and the civilization moved out of the jungle into the highlands, where the civilization moved up to places like Chichen Itza. Then in the 11th or 12th century, where Chichen Itza was abandoned, they moved up to Mayapan, which was still active until the Spanish arrived, but using a very, very different political structure, one that was not based around a, kind of like a god king type ruler, but more around a family kind of like business, as it were. Found around family community groups and that kind of thing. something completely different. And so, kind of like when we look at that, it's been through many, many, many stages of evolution, carrying the calendar through it. But this is, kind of like a civilization that keeps changing its form, changing its way. That's like what it's bringing in, and the archaeology changes with that as well.
Right. Yes. It's interesting you had mentioned the Celestine prophecy, because I read that book in 7th grade. I was really young, and it was the first time I had read anything like that. And I remember that was the first time I heard about the Mayans. It was in that book.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, it was a while ago now.
In the story, I think it was towards the end, they go into how the Mayans disappeared. And I think that's where everybody has that idea that they just disappeared. Like they just, from one day to another, the civilization was gone.
Yes.
Yeah, but they migrated.
Yeah.
They migrated.
Yes, absolutely.
They would leave peoples behind and then move to new places.
Yeah, I mean, there was, and it's interesting because, okay, you're using the idea that they disappeared, and that coming from the Celestine prophecy, and kind of like sometimes when we go back and read books which were very important to us at a particular time, then with new information we realize that maybe we've moved on a little bit from where they were, because of course that was based in Peru, and they're talking about the Maya, and it's kind of like there's a bit of a mix up there or something like that,
Yeah.
But kind of like there is some very interesting things when we look at, as I say, I want to look at it not as a collapse, but as a reinvention of society. Because I think the term collapse, gives maybe the wrong impression. In what we see from kind of like, I think it's like from about 830 AD through to about 910 AD. I think 910 is the last time that there is a stela which is inscribed with a date. And we see building stops, temple work stops, all of these kind of things stop from 830 onwards. This is why they called it a collapse, because they saw a society that over sort of 50 to 80 years just stopped doing what it had been doing so well. Now, there are various things that we can see that have, in one way or another, been recorded. One of them is that there was a drought. And that drought started, and that drought seems to have been exacerbated by certain actions. Those actions were things like cutting down trees. Because every time that they would create one of these big temples, they would coat the outside with lime. That lime, I think it's something like you need 6 cubic meters of wood to kill 1 cubic meter of lime. So you start building all these temples, you're going to chop down a lot of trees. Now, the initial change, the initial drought or the initial climate change that came in may well have been due to cycles of the sun. As we see last year, we get the aurora happening at middle latitudes, and we're also getting these huge hurricanes coming in, and El Nino and all that kind of thing. It's like solar activity disturbing our weather and that kind of thing. Well, kind of like they were building more temples because they were experiencing a drought. But of course, the more trees that they chopped down, the drier the climate became, the more the drought went on. Now, one of the other things that you could see is that in many of the sites, there's a lot of mercury contamination. And that mercury contamination came from these sites where, I don't know if you're aware, but I don't know if I've got one that's to hand that can show you, but many of these sites, the pyramids were actually this red color. You may have seen the artist's impressions of how they look.
And saw that in the
red color
in the models.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that red color was a pigment called cinnabar, which is a mercury compound. Now, they were very, very smart people. What they did was that they channeled a lot of water off the pyramids and into reservoirs for drinking water during dry season, particularly at Tikal, because Tikal has no natural water source. So, when you start getting a dry year after a dry year after a dry year, your reservoirs are starting to dry up. The only, kind of like who's going to get access to the water first? Well, the elites, of course, but what's that water doing? Well, you're basically scraping the bottom of the reservoir where all the mercury residues are. And there is some evidence in some of the late classic era vases where the morphology of the figures on it shows some classic symptoms of mercury poisoning. So you've got let's say that the rulers of the city are kind of, mercury affects the mind, right? So we got the rulers maybe not in the best space to be making decisions. We have trees being cut down that induced a local climate change. We've got starvation in the population through drought and all of these kind of things. So these rulers that might have initially been seen as divine rulers, well, if you can't provide for your people, if the people haven't got the water and they haven't got the food that they need to survive, you don't look like much of a divine ruler, do you? And so I think there were then elements that came along. There is some evidence that in the 10th century, you start to see a name that comes into certain political records or whatever of the Aloms. And the Alom is not a name from that area. And it seems to be there's almost like this foreign influence that comes in. And I think that it then turned into something which is less, kind of like ruler and city states and more like councils, kind of like rather than having these rulers, those ruling noble class or whatever, well, they've been shown that they're not divine anymore. And, why would you follow a system where the rulers have kind of like, for want of better words, gone mad and, kind of like let themselves down? And, I think there's an interesting thing that we could see in parallel with our own society right now. They created these amazing works, these centralizations of civilization, but they were also liable to environmental degradation, climate change, deforestation, and, kind of like toxicity in their waters. And it kind of rings a lot of bells with what's going on right now,
Well, it's, I believe it's it's cycles of consciousness, and that affects all of our external world. Fall of consciousness, rise of consciousness. And, I'm sure this comes out in the larger calendar cycles as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. I'm sure, kind of like, we could be looking back 52 years, or we could be looking back 400 years, or, kind of so on and so on. But it's certainly kind of like looking at things and going, right, okay, I think that the cyclic nature of time gives us an opportunity to say, do we want to repeat this cycle or do we want to move up to the next level? And this is the important bit, seeing time as a spiral rather than a circle, the cyclic time, not just having that circular component, because circular component would mean that we never move forward. But if we look at it much more as a spiral, then we can understand that, yes, there is a circular component, but we're also translating that circle through something in time to move forward. So I think that that's kind of like the previous cycle gives us an understanding of what might come up and how we might deal with it. But we also have the opportunity to move it forwards as well.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. And then ultimately, well, like you said, some of the solar activity affects us as well. So I think it's just a co-creation with whatever's going on with the sun and these spiral movements of human consciousness and development, right?
Yes, absolutely. And, kind of again with the calendar, it's the ability to map that, say, kind of like at the end of the day, we're going to travel through sunny days and we're going to travel through rainy days and we're going to travel through foggy days and snowy days and windy days and all of the different kinds of weather. Mm-hmm. Now, what makes different is being appropriately clothed for the weather conditions, let's say, or appropriately prepared for the particular weather condition. And again, that's where I feel that the calendar and the cycles of time, which have been plotted out by the Maya, for generations, are something that can help us to navigate our way through time, to understand a better way of doing it, so that, hopefully we don't make mistakes that have been made in the past that have led to, full scale, collapse of civilizations, as it were.
Right. Changes not just in the individual level, but in the collective level as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's go into, so you're an Ahki, and
Yes.
I would love to hear from your perspective what it means to be an Ahki.
I have an idea, and my idea is that the role of the Ahki is to create and promote harmony in society. And that is the role of the calendar. Ach-ich means he of the days, or he of the sun. It is somebody who has the knowledge or the understanding of the sacred calendar, and I think the sacred calendar has been put here to help to bring harmony to our society. Therefore, an Ach-ich, by definition, it's like their primary role and primary goal is to bring that harmony into community. Now, I see that as being the bridge or the gateway for all of us, is what we should be doing, but like in particular between the heart of the earth and the heart of the sky, to be, kind of like the channel for both of those in the physical realm, to understand, kind of like how to navigate the days.
And the heart of the sky is the cosmic divine masculine. Heart of the earth is cosmic divine feminine, right? That's one way we could see it.
Yeah. Yep, that's it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you recount your initiation experience as an Ahki? What was that like for you?
So I met my teacher in 2010, and I met him it was about February of 2010 at a Washikit Bad ceremony. This is the celebration of the calendar, one of the initiation days. And this is actually coming up on the 18th of January of this year. So it's very close, kind of like to this recording. And I was in San Marcos, La Laguna at the time. And with a friend, we decided, hey, wouldn't it be cool to go up to Momostenango for Washiki Bats, go and see, kind of like go see the ceremonies, because Momostenango is a place where people come from all over Latin America to go there on Washiki Bats. They'll make pilgrimages from Mexico, from Honduras, from El Salvador to go especially to Momostenango, because it is said to be the spiritual capital of the Quichean people. So I'm up there, and one of the things that I was traveling around with was this calendar tube that I kind of came up with in the year 2000, which was all through the use of the Mayan cross, the way that it could be extrapolated, and the way that it actually becomes a three-dimensional object if you do that. That's another story. I'd been walking around with this tube to various elders trying to understand what it was that I'd found. And this was 2010, and I found it in 2000. So 10 years I'd been kind of like trying to find out what the heck it was that I was carrying around. And I walked into a particular building and got chatting with the guys in there and got this tube out, and they're like, we'd better call Tata. And Don Rigo comes in and he's like, well, who showed you this? Who taught you this? And like, no one. I just worked it out. It just made sense to me that that's the way it should be. And he said, well, you've got three of our sciences combined into one place here. And that's when I found out that I'd met the Tata that I was hoping to meet. I didn't, as I necessarily go looking for him. We happened to have this interaction. And a couple of weeks later, I got an email to ask if it would be okay if he came to visit me in San Marcos. And he would like to come and visit me. This is such an honor. Wonderful. Yes, of course, whenever. And then I got a phone call and then he came to visit. Then we started making ceremonies together. And in 2014, I'd already been, kind of like making readings and that kind of thing for some time. I mean, I'd been studying the calendar by the time we get around to about 2011, when I made my first reading, I'd been studying the calendar for 13 years. So, kind of like I'd got a lot of experience under my belt. And in 2014, at the initiation ceremony of a friend, I said to Don Rigo, I said, I think I'd like to take my path. I think I'd like to be, can we do my initiation process? At which point he was like, oh, finally asked, thank you. I've been waiting for you for some time to ask. And this is something which, again, it's like anything else. If you're going to go into something, you have to give your permission. You have to give your, how can I put it? Like, you're taking on a sacred bundle. You're taking on a role. You have to enter that voluntarily of your own free will. And that's, we hear these lovely stories about someone tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, I've been seeing you in my dreams. It's about time you're here. You are the chosen one. All of that kind of stuff that we see in the movies. Word like that. It's like we have to give our consent that we are ready to do that. And when we are initiated, we are effectively becoming married with our sacred bundle. You can't expect somebody to force you into a marriage that you don't want to be in. But you have to enter it voluntarily.
The pouch,
the seeds. Yeah. It's like our spiritual spouse. And so, kind of like if we're going to take the path to become married to a spiritual spouse, we have to give our consent for it.
Right. And will, we fill it into our life. It can't be from the outside. Somebody can't ask us to do that.
No, we have to want to do it. And, and of course there's kind of like, there's those things. It's like, we might want to do something, but we also might not be suitable to do it. And so there's, it's not to say that, just because we want something, then we get it. But like, if we're suitable, it's not till we express our desire to take that path that, kind of like it can happen for us. And so that was about.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, this is the part where then, you then have from what I understand, if you want to become an Aki, then you do a divination with the site seeds, and then there's a sacred fire involved that will kind of tell the guide if you are suited for it.
I think I'd be making those sacred fires with Don Rigo for about 4 years. And so, kind of like before, when I bought my land, before I did any work on my land, we had a sacred fire here. That fire pit is still my fire pit. Mm-hmm. We made that fire on the day 8 Washikib and that, kind of like that altar has been my home altar ever since.
So you were just his apprentice before you decided to become an Aki?
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, yes, no, I think apprentice might be a little bit too much of a, kind of like, how can I put it, like over dramatizing it, as it were. But certainly, I mean, I was organizing things for, and like he would come down and make ceremonies here and I would help him out. And, we were friends going and doing stuff together, and I would be up there for washing bats and I'd be up there. Yeah. And it's just kind of like, shadowing somebody, kind of like and seeing what they do. And then, kind of like I said, in 2014, I finally said, hey, can I do this? And he said, great, yes, we'll be waiting for you to do it. And then, actually in my case, we did 13 cleansing ceremonies, which went through the whole of 2014 and into the beginning of 2015. As it was every Ish day, where my bundle would be introduced to the altar, and the bridge would be created, as it were, until 5-ish on the 23rd of February of 2015, when I received my initiation.
On your Mayan birthday.
Yes. And then even then, when you receive your bundle, even though you've been trained in how to use the tikbe, and you've been trained in how to make the fire, and how, kind of what comes where, the order of ceremony and all of those kind of things, you also then get to the point where it's like, okay, you are now Akhpatan. And Akhpatan is a bit like, some places where when you pass your driver's test, you then have to drive with P plates on to show that you are a new driver or something like that. So the first thing that happens is you get set a task, and that task, certainly in my case, was to make 60 ceremonies over the next 260 days. So to make ceremony on every 1 day, every 6 day, and every 8 day. Wow. During of the calendar. And so that took me from February of 2015 through to November of 2015. And so, this is kind of like, right, okay, before you can go out and make ceremony for others, you have to get yourself familiar by making, this quantity of ceremonies. And then you can be an akbir.
That's interesting.
So in total, kind of like let's say, when does training start? When does training end? You're always training, as it were. Mm-hmm. But it could say that there's almost like a formalized process of 520 days rather than 260. And this could mimic the kind of like what we see, sometimes when a child is born, when I've seen a kind of like a ceremony being done for a child, that ceremony is being done on the first day of their nawal. Okay, not the day that they're born, because on the day that they're born, the mother's going to be worn out. The child's not in a condition to go and spend 3 hours by a fire either, kind of thing. When you're ready to take the child to the ceremony, that's after, kind of 260 days. So if you see conception, 260 days in the womb, 260 days out of the womb, 520 days in total to make the full human being born. And so 260 days of limpieza, 260 days of practice before the true Akte can be born.
That's fascinating. I've never heard it like that, because I've heard also they'll take you to some of the sacred temples or lands in Guatemala that represent each Nawal, and then you receive your Nawalas there.
Yeah. And this is also a big and important part of it, I think, is sort of like, sometimes I describe that, or I get the idea that learning how to make a fire ceremony is like learning how to cook. But the inspiration for the ingredients that you put into the meal comes from your experience. And this comes from working with other Akhtikhab and working around other places and seeing different things that come in and come out. Because at the end of the day, if everybody's making ceremony in exactly the same way, it's a bit like making McDonald's, it's kind of like a standardized recipe throughout the thing. And, if we're truly engaging with spirit, if we're truly working with the Nawalas through our prayers and that, we need to embrace our individuality and express our poetry, our art, and our beauty through the prayers and through our offerings. Each time we're making a different table for the Nawalas. And if all of our tables look the same, then it'd be a pretty sad outlook for the ceremony, I think,
Yeah, I love this conversation, because I think this could lead us into what the Washuki Bats, which means 8 bats, coming this Saturday, January 18th. And I wanted you to take us through what exactly, where is it held, who's there, and all of the elements that go into it as an akif. There's a attire, there's candles and incenses and all sorts of things offered to the fire. And I just wanted to And just to hear from your perspective, what is that like?
Well, I think it's a bit like Christmas. Like, put it that way,
Mhm.
okay? The reason why I say that is, kind of, oh, sorry, let's get the lighting on. The reason why I say it like that is because if, let's say, you might have people who identify as Christian, but only go to church on Easter Sunday and Christmas Day or something like that. Okay. And I think you also find, within, let's say, uh, you might have people who might have been trained to be an archik or something, but they kind of like they let it lapse, but they would still choose to make ceremony on Washikit Bats because it is the day of the marriage to the sacred calendar. It is the day of celebration of the sacred calendar itself. Now, many people will also be initiated as Archikab on Washikit Bats. And the reason for this is because that 8, like I said, is like marriage. It's the ceremonial day. And bats, whilst we kind of like, we have a lot of things to do with the monkey and that kind of thing, bats is really the thread. And it's about the weaving of reality, the weaving of time. And so bats is in a while of the sacred calendar itself. And so 8 bats could be seen as the marriage to the sacred calendar, which is why it's seen as a day of initiation. It's also seen as a day of marriage. I've got some dear friends who are going to be getting married on this Washikit Bats. I have some dear friends that got married on Washikit Bats a few years ago as well. So there's that essence of it. So it's like, I was going to say, how, let's say, maybe if we likened it to a social scene, then there might be something like on New Year's Eve in the Gregorian calendar, then you might see everybody in town, everybody's out for it. This is like what Washikit Bats does. It draws everybody out that wants to come and make ceremony, because even if they haven't made ceremony every week or every month or whatever, they're ready to make it on Washikit Bats. Now, places like Momostanango get very full. Momostanango is, as I said, it's like basically say it's like the Mayan Mecca, as it were, spiritual, like a spiritual place, particularly around ceremony. And so this gets very full with people from all over the place, all celebrating, making ceremonies in many, many varied ways, which can also be, it's kind of interesting to see. I remember when we went up there in 2010, sometimes there's some people that use eggs on their fire. There's somebody, I even saw sausages on the fire as well. I was like, wow, this is like a, full breakfast going on this fire. They're really looking after the ancestors here. And, you're always going to have your copal. You're always going to have the candles and the ocote, the pitch pine, the fat wood that we use as the fuel of the fire or the food of the fire. We use a lot of incense and a lot of seeds and aromatic barks and resins. And, with regards to attire, well, I suppose, at the end of the day, I was going to say we have a term in England, I don't know whether it's anywhere else, but about putting on your Sunday best, meaning your church clothes, as it were. And let's say that if you're strolling up the hill at 5 a.m. on a regular work day, then you might be wearing something different to when you got 100 people coming to your wedding on a Sunday kind of thing. And so, kind of like often we'll find that many people, when they're making ceremony, wear, kind of like a white shirt, red sash. They always wear the tsut, which is the headscarf that we are, is part of our lineage. It's part of what we are, we receive when we're initiated. Some people
What
get
does it represent? I would like
dressed up.
to hear that. What did you call it?
The tsut. The tsut is the headscarf that we use, it's a ceremonial headscarf, which is seen as both, it's seen as we use it out of respect to the fire. And it's kind of interesting because I've seen, again, there is so much diversity through the country, that different ideas from different people. I was just at a meeting last night where they were recounting a fire ceremony back in 2010. And they were saying that everybody who was around the fire was given a tsut to wear, whether they were initiated or not. And it was seen as a sign of respect towards the fire. And yet other Akhtikhab will have this thing with like, have you been initiated? No, then you can't wear your tsut, even if you've been given one to wear. So it varies massively from one ethno-linguistic group to another, from, even one lineage to another, as to the way that it would be approached. Right. Now, my particular tsut is momostakan. It's red with, kind of like a black check on it, as it were. And that is a traditional momostakan fabric, and it has the Mayan cross embroidered onto the front of it. So that's, kind of the way that is, that's done.
Beautiful.
And you'll see others that are done in a different way. So, kind of like depending on the lineage that they come from. It's a bit like, in some ways, it can be seen as a bit like an ID card, because you know where somebody's from by what color their tsut is. Sometimes people say, it depends on, kind of like what and while you carry it. Sometimes even what day of the week that you're born on, as to what color tsut you wear.
And what are the why the offerings for somebody that's new to all of this, and they don't know what a sacred fire ceremony is and why they're putting things in the fire? What would be the most simple, basic thing you would tell them, describing what that is?
It's, again, interesting with regards to the sacred fire itself. Sometimes I see the sacred fire as it's like a table of offerings to the council. There are 20 nawales. The 20 nawales could be seen as 5 different expressions of the 4 elements. And so we need all 20 nawales for creation to take place. As we move through a sacred fire, we invoke each of the nawales and make an offering to it to give thanks for the water or the air or the natural world or the sacred sites or the women or whatever it might be. And as we make that offering, now, usually like the standard thing that we're going to offer, a yellow candle and a white candle representing the feminine and the masculine. And these little discs called quilkov with which we count the days. Okay, so they're the standard, but then every so often I'm going to give people an extra offering to put on. So, for example, I might give them copal, which is like a high incense, an aromatic resin. I might give them that for the day Achpu, and for the day Kat, and for the day Ech, because it's making this offering with Achpu for our spiritual journey, with Ech for the blessings on our journey, on our path. And with Kat, I would also give them a little thread, the thread representing something we're attached to that we're ready to detach into the fire. Okay, so that how Kat can help us to release our burdens. But when something helps us to release our burdens, we're going to want to give it a little payment. And so we give it the copal as well as the thread in order to make sure that that it receives something for its work.
Okay, I love that.
I also invite people when we're calling the Nawal Anil. This is something where I look at it from the point of view of like, okay, Anil is about bringing things to ripeness. And I give everybody a cacao bean to offer on the day Anil, or when we're calling Anil. Why? Because cacao was used as a currency, so it represents something which is abundant. Cacao is the base of chocolate. We all like chocolate, right? It's kind of like it's something joyful. It's something delicious. It's something fun. It represents, I don't want to say decadence, but there's a certain element of that to it. It's the good stuff in life. It's the stuff that makes life worth living. It's a joyful bit. Yeah.
And it makes the smoke coming from the fire smell good, which that is one of the remarkable things about a Mayan fire ceremony is the smell of it. It's just so sweet.
Yes. So when I give them the cacao bean, I will then open up the center of the fire and ask them to plant that bean like the seed of something that they wish to bring to fruition into the fire. Okay, so again, it's a manifestation through the fire. It's like, say, right, okay, I would ask the fire to bring this to its maturity. Yes, and, kind of like, and I think, and with Achmach, the day Achmach, we offer sugar to the fire, and Achmach is all about forgiveness. And it's like, right, okay, this sugar that you hold, imagine something that's making you bitter. Something that a blame, a grudge, a shame, a guilt, or whatever it might be. Let's imagine that. Let's put that into the fire on Achmach, and as it burns, then we get this caramel smell coming out from the fire. We remember the sweetness of life. And this is what we're, what we're here to do. Now, whilst we make these offerings, it's interesting that you should bring up the smell of the fire, because I have also kind of like heard, well, those offerings, they're all kind of like table dressing, but the real food for the Nahuales is our words. The prayers that we make at the fire, that is the great meal that they've come in for. And sometimes those aromas, they're like, if you're walking down the high street and you walk past a new restaurant, it smells good. I wonder what they got cooking in there. I'll go and see, go and have, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll taste that. Oh, now the chef wants to come and speak with me. What's the chef got to say? And so kind of like in some ways, these aromas are to draw in the Nahuales, they're to draw in the spirit so that they have our ear, kind of like we're making something nice for them. So that they're kind of like, okay, while I'm eating, I have a listen to what you got to say kind of thing.
That's beautiful. Amazing. And I have so many other questions for you, but I think we should probably do another one. But I think the last few things, well, I think what stands out from your work the most, because I've read all sorts of books and followed different akis and but I was wondering how much of what you shared is passed down from your teachers and how much, because I think you've come up with certain adjustments or additions to the cross, and you've been studying astronomy for a long time, and I think you've contributed a lot. So I just want to kind of highlight that because I think that really stands out about you.
Thank you. Yeah, there's some bits which for me, in particular, my scientific, mathematical, astronomical background and, kind of like also what we see in the Dresden Codex is we start to look at mathematical patterns. We can extrapolate those patterns. When we start to look at things like, kind of like understanding how we could look at the Mayan cross and maybe find transition ages in there. Understanding how we can take one thing to move to the next by using the same mathematics, the same formula. And so that's, kind of, as you say, some of it has come from my teacher. But I've done a lot of reading and studying around the subject. And the same with regards to astronomy and, kind of like the mathematics and all of these kind of things. And, kind of what we can see is that we have to go to many sources in order to, get a full understanding of what we're looking at. I often think of it as like, I was going to say kind of like if we imagine this crystal to represent the calendar. Now you're seeing that side of it. I'm seeing this side of it. Somebody else is seeing that side of it. And we could all be talking about the same thing, but we're giving a different description. And so I have to visit your side to see what you could see. And I have to visit this side and maybe up above and maybe down below in order to get a full and representative understanding of exactly what we're looking at. And if I choose to get stuck, I think that, well, I suppose dogma is like the enemy of science, but dogma could also be the enemy of evolution. Because say, no, I'm seeing this. I'm only seeing this, and no, what you're seeing, well, that can't possibly be right because that doesn't match with what I'm seeing. And it's no, we have to explore things from every possible angle so that we can really understand its wholeness.
It should be a general rule of life.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%, but it's obviously right, obviously respect everywhere. We always start with respect and, kind of like with what's going on, but also never to be, kind of like ruling things out, but to understand where they might fit in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Well, also, I just wanted to thank you for the Google Calendar plugin. That is something that I have been curious about. Is that something you worked on with a developer?
No. You
made it?
Myself. Yeah.
Wow. That's really cool.
I decided it was basically like many things. It's necessity that makes you create, right? And so I was in town. Somebody wanted to get a reading with me. They asked me if I was free. I didn't have my diary, and I was, Wednesday, I think I'm free or something like that. And then I realized on Wednesday I was supposed to be making ceremony, or maybe it was like in a week's time or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay, now I've got to find them and rearrange it, or that kind of thing. Wouldn't it be cool if I had the sacred calendar on my phone so that when I look it up on my Google Calendar, I could see, oh, no, sorry, well, that's Washiki Bat, so I'm going to be making ceremony on that day and I can't do a reading or something like that. And so I started, and, kind of like, again, it was one of those things where it was a labor of love. And the first time around, it was just what it was. And then I decided to put the description of each day, so that you've probably seen if you tap on the day, it will give you the similar text.
I just found out the other day you could do that.
Yeah, I know. I did mention it on my site, but it was a bit of an afterthought. So I was always looking at how I could link that in, but I worked out how to link that in, and it just pops up on the heading of each day so that you've got the Mayan Sacred Calendar in your pocket.
Well, that is very crafty. I don't know how you did it, but it's pretty remarkable. I'm really grateful for that tool. And yeah, are there any new projects that you're working on at this time, or are you involved in any projects that are being dreamed up?
There's a couple of projects that one is a personal project, which is the first presentation of which will be at the end of this month, but it will be literally here, which I'm kind of like calling Sky Watching with the Ancestors, which is kind of like introducing people to astronomy, then taking them out with the telescope and actually kind of like going and having a look at planets and all that kind of thing. They're helping them to understand the movements of the sky. To help them to, and, kind of like aligning it with, kind of like ancient stories and that kind of thing, so that we can kind of like bring those two things together. Because again, if you really want to understand these things, you can't understand them from just sitting at the computer. You have to go out and be there. This is why I'm choosing to walk to Mirador to see Venus rise on the 28th of March. And, these kind of things, because it's like, you got to do what the ancestors were doing in order to understand what the ancestors were thinking. Put yourself in their position, then you can put yourself into their mindset to understand it in a deeper level. And I think the other thing that I'm really rather excited about is an initiative which is coming up in Guatemala City called the Green Health Initiative, which is also with regards to building kind of like a center in Guatemala City, which, kind of like we might say, well, that's a strange place for it, but there's some beautifully undeveloped green parts of Guatemala City. And this center is going to be for Achihab from all different ethno-linguistic groups to come together to share their knowledge. It's going to be a repository of information for the elders. It's also going to be a place where people can learn, kind of like so that this amazing wisdom that is held here in Guatemala is preserved and passed on for future generations. There is always the chance that things are going to get lost. And this Imai, as it will be known, is something which is really here to preserve that in the best possible ways. So it's very exciting. It's something which is being developed by some dear friends of mine. And I hope that there'll be more to share about that over the sort of coming months or year.
Is there any link or somewhere where we could just check it out and contribute to it if we could?
Yes, there is. There's certainly. I can send you a link for that. So
yeah, and I'll put it in the description so people could go and check it out and contribute to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they're still working out how to make their charitable status and that, so they don't have a donation link just yet. But I think that this and the Popple High, where you have elders who are saying, look, we're not going to be around forever. We need to pass our wisdom on somewhere. And if our kids aren't picking it up, we need to leave it. So maybe our grandkids or our great grandkids can, have got their heritage, have got their lineage there. And maybe people, kind of like, I hope that people like myself can act as a bridge, kind of like to hold on to it for a little while longer so it can be passed on or whatever. But yeah, I think that this, MIE, when it gets moving, is really going to be a very, very important project for the preservation of Maya wisdom.
Yes, I think you've shared a few on your site, and yeah, I've looked into them and sent some donations. I think it's so important to continue preserving this, and yeah, I feel like you're doing that work quite well as well through your work. So
thank you. Hopefully,
thank you again. Yeah. Do you feel complete?
I think that's it for now, to be perfectly honest. I think that's kind of like, it's getting to that time of the day or the afternoon where, I hope that I've answered the questions satisfactorily. And I hope that you've, kind of like, it's certainly been a pleasure to be hanging out with you again and chatting with you again and, that kind of thing. And I hope that, kind of like your projects and your channel are going to flourish and thrive.
Oh, thank you so much, Mark. Well, it's been such a pleasure, and have a wonderful Washaki Bats. I'll be thinking of you in all of Guatemala.
Thank you. Yeah.
I hope to see some photos.
Enjoy the new site.
That would be beautiful.
Okay, I'll see what I can do, but I'm not kind of big on taking ceremony photos and that kind of thing. So,
that's I noticed that's some people do and so like others don't. But that is one thing I appreciated about the Mayan culture, that like you do see some photos of ceremonies and it's so beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, it's like when I say to people when they come to the ceremonies that I'm facilitating, are you here to take photos, or are you here for the ceremony?
Right.
Because if you're a photographer and you come to take photos, and fine, knock yourself out. I don't want to be splashed all over social media. I'm a little bit shy and that kind of thing sometimes anyway. But there's been some beautiful photos that have taken. The sacred fire is an amazing thing to photograph because it always seems so alive. But, if you are there to be present in ceremony, be present in ceremony.
I agree.
If you are watching the fire through a screen, you're not being present and you're kind of missing the point. And so this is where I say to people, look, my best advice to you would be turn your phone off or put it in flight mode or put it on silent, however you feel is okay. Put it in your bag and forget about it and just be here. Be in your heart. Be with the fire and just allow that to happen for Kind of like you'll pick up on the news in 3 hours time after the ceremony or whatever.
Oh, yeah, especially social media. No, I'm just thinking about like, oh, just a quick capture and, then go back to the ceremony.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but, kind of like, and there's that part of it as well, because the moment they pick it up to take a picture, they suddenly realize one of their friends has messaged them and they just want to see the mess. And it just, kind of like, it is nice just to kind of like say, let's just have an electronics free zone for a little while. And, here we are doing our thing, using electronics, using all of this amazing, fantastic technology that you'd only dreamed about 30 years ago or something like that, I'm certainly not anti-technology or anything like that, but there's a time and a place. Absolutely. And for me, ceremony is something to remember, like how to connect with the fire, how to connect with each other, and how to feel the energy of the Nahuales through that sacred fire, unpolluted by our tech.
Mm-hmm. It's very powerful. I've been to one and it's quite powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to ask is, do they say Happy New Year? So I've never been to Washakipat's ceremony.
Okay. So there again, this is a bit of a can of worms, as it were, because for me, my way that I would choose to say it, I would never use the term Happy New Year or New Year with Washakipats.
Okay.
And the reason is that firstly, it's not a year, it's a 260-day cycle.
Right.
And I would reserve the words New Year for the Mayan New Year, which in the Highlands will come around on February 18th. And so it is a new cycle. It's the beginning of the initiation. Washakipats is a new cycle. It's the beginning of the initiation cycle. It's the beginning of the ceremonial cycle. And so, yeah, I don't really see it like that at all. So, kind of like, not really Happy New Year as such.
That makes sense.
And I'm not, yeah. And then the new year coming around, they actually sort of like say it's the seating of the new mam, the new grandfather will take his seat. And this means the Nawal, which will be the carrier of the solar energy for the next 365 days within the ordinary or civil calendar. Okay. And so again, it's kind of like understanding the names that things go by and how they work. So like, we have, kind of like, let's say January 18th, Washakipat's new ceremonial cycle, February 18th, Oshlu Ir 13 Ir, which is the Mayan New Year, as it were, the new solar year.
Right.
And so this is where, especially if people say Happy New Year in January 18th, and then people say Happy New Year in February 18th, people go, well, which one's the New Year? And gets a bit confusing.
Well, it's fun that there's so many celebrations that you get to celebrate something like a New Year twice, for them in the Mayan culture.
Absolutely. And because it's 260-day calendar, you can also look at it from the point of view of you will have your Gregorian birthday, which measures your day, where the earth was in relation to the sun on the day that you were born, where the earth was in its orbit around the sun. That's going to give you your Gregorian birthday. And then you could end up with 2 Maya birthdays within each year as well. So that's 3 opportunities for a birthday party in a year, which is always good to celebrate.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much again, Mark, and I hope you have a beautiful weekend and Washakipats, and really, really appreciate you for taking your time to chat with me today.
Thank you. Lovely to see you again.
Alrighty. Take care.